Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. It's good to have you with us again. So before we get into the video, just a reminder to like, share and subscribe, and you can also become a member of the channel as well. I have 3 levels of membership available, and it goes a long way to supporting me, helping me grow and reach a wider audience so we can all learn, share and repeat. And learning is what we're all about on this channel. And I have a new series today, and you will notice that I have a guest with me. So the purpose of this new series is to tell you, my audience, about subjects that I'm not particularly familiar with. So my background is very much Microsoft 365 and security, compliance, identity, a little bit of Teams. So I'm in my niche areas, but there's lots of things I don't know about. And that's where I'm going to get some people from the community and colleagues to help me in this series that I'm inventively calling Educating Peter. If you get that pun, more power to you. If you don't, go and look up an early 1980s movie starring Michael Caine and Julie Walters. But anyhow, I digress. I will introduce my very first guest on this series, and I'm delighted to welcome my very good friend and colleague, Ben Thomas. Ben, welcome. How are you, my friend?
Thanks, Peter. I'm doing well. Doing well. So Friday afternoon, obviously, get ready for the weekend.
So Ben, you're going to talk to us a little bit about Azure today and some of the free services that you can get in Azure. But before we get into that, would you mind just doing a very brief introduction for the audience about who you are and what you do and all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Ben Thomas. I work for Insight as a senior cloud consultant. What that kind of consists of is working with customers of different various of sizes with a cloud need. So whether that is assisting them to get into the cloud, or they're in the cloud and they want to optimize some of the costs, or if they want to explore new services, Azure Arc, automation accounts, you name it. Obviously, it all covers just everything. So it's hard to be good at everything or know everything. And like I say, it's having that deep understanding to know what services is right. And obviously, I have my skills, specialist skill sets, and there's a wider team that have their specialist skill sets. So, like I say, master of none, jack of all, maybe.
Yeah, and
To
I hear where you're
summarize
coming
it.
from. And Azure or Azure, however you pronounce it, it's such a minefield. There's so much in there, and I realized this more than ever when I took the SC series of exams probably last year now, and I got to the big one, the SC 100, which is Cybersecurity Architect Expert. There is a ton of Azure content in there. There's the stuff that I'm fairly comfortable with, like Sentinel. But there's also things like you've mentioned, like Arc and WAF or WAF or what is that again? Is that well architected frameworks or is that something else?
So, like anything in IT, there's loads of acronyms for all sorts, and there's a lot of crossover. So, the WAF could be the Well Architected Framework, which is obviously a framework from Microsoft on not only once you kind of adopted the cloud, you can take it to the next level, and how you would go about that using the framework. Or a WAF could be a web
Ah.
application firewall, which is available on a application gateway. So, like I say, you're a couple of options at
Yeah, there's
WAF.
so many acronyms, isn't there? It's like Custo query language or keyword query language. Why can't they just have their own separate acronyms for these things? So annoying. But yeah, that particular exam that I'm referencing, that was a hard one for me, being more of an M365 guy, and I had to really study to learn all of these principles of Azure. And the exam took me 3 times to pass, but I was determined to keep going. After getting it, I couldn't do all of that stuff in a day job. No way. But I was just so determined to understand at a high level and get past the exam and know enough to be dangerous, but not skilled.
And that's it really as well.
Yeah.
You know, it's knowing enough, and that's always the challenge is that you can't know. Obviously, you've got your day-to-day kind of workings that actually you've got
Mm,
really good deep product knowledge, and um, and there are subjects where you know enough of the
mm,
service to know when to apply it, but then still need to research that, use the learn articles and whatnot to really kind of understand what the challenge is for the customer, and then how you're going to apply it in that particular challenge. Because it might be that, I've had it in the past with customer engagements where they want to use Azure Data Factory, and actually they're just trying to modernize some of the SQL workloads, and actually they could do a migration, and there's other ways and means of doing that migration. I'm not saying that they can't use Azure Data Factory, because 100% you can, but it really does depend on the workload, and the assessment tools. Obviously, there's a whole range of them, and that's where they really come in. And SQL being quite a common workload, it's really important to run that assessment first and just assess that workload, because you might, for every will in the world, want to put that on a PaaS service, so a platform as a service, where Microsoft manage that for you. If your application, or ultimately your SQL workload, can't sit on that service because you lose functionality, there are pros and cons to that. Knowing beforehand saves a lot of embarrassment, or a lot of time fixing something, when you can almost do a land and expand kind of operation, where you migrate the SQL workload as is, as a infrastructure as a service kind of approach, and then once you're in the cloud, it gives you that ability to look at it and then look at what PaaS offerings you can then consume. And it might not be that it becomes Azure SQL. You might go off on a tangent and pick Cosmos DB, or NoSQL, or something like that, because it fits the application better. So there's moving to the cloud, but then there's also not remaining stagnant at the same time, which I think is an important message to come across, is that if you just want to move everything because you're looking at a data center exit, that's fine. If you want to actually start leveraging the cloud, you need to start leveraging those cloud services, and that's where the value starts, because it is just, you could just spin up VMs, but they're just VMs.
Absolutely. So you mentioned PaaS, platform as a service. So and there's IaaS as well, infrastructure as a service. Software as a service is the area that I'm most comfortable in, because that alludes to the Microsoft 365 side of things. But IaaS and PaaS, what's the sort of main differences between those two?
It's really around the manageability, where that responsibility lies. IaaS, Microsoft are just providing the underlying virtual services, networking, connectivity. You manage everything from the VM, inside the VM, the application within the VM, and then as you take PaaS offerings, you take away the VM management, and they just provide you with a service. SQL's a great example of that. Another great example of that is file servers. 100% you can spin up a file server on IaaS kind of instance, but then you can also consume Azure files, and that's just storage in essence. And there's a whole kind of advantage, disadvantage to that. I mean, I really see it as a positive, as like my background is like 15, 16 years in managed service providers, managing file servers, managing SQL, managing application boxes. And you know what? When 365 come out, it was a godsend. I knew that I could get away with my Exchange server, and actually, chuck it out the window, put it in a skip, do whatever I wanted with it, because I didn't need to manage that box anymore. And it's a similar kind of concept for Azure Files. Certainly is why manage a compute instance as well as a storage instance. Just use the storage. Obviously, there's some scenarios where it may not work if you've got applications that write to shares. If it doesn't use an AD user account, there's still ways and means of accessing it. Obviously, it depends on how the application works as well. So there's a lot of caveats. If it's straight up user accounts, you've got an Azure AD tenant, you can see line of sight of your DC. Azure Files is a no-brainer for me, and it works well. And you can front it with DFS, so you don't even need, the user won't even be aware necessarily that it's in Azure. And I'm only touching the surface there as well. There's a whole host of storage sync services, cloud tiering, having, utilizing the service as almost kind of a offsite copy. You can do quite a lot with it. And like I say, I'm only probably not even giving it
Well,
justice.
we've got to start somewhere, and it's always logical to start these journeys one step at a time.
Yep.
So if you were beginning this sort of Azure journey now, if you were wanting to get into it, I think we talked before this video about maybe sharing with anyone watching about the free Azure services. Is that a logical place to sort of get to know Azure a bit and become comfortable with it and what's available without getting into paying for stuff and getting into subscriptions and pricing tiers and whatnot?
Yeah, I mean, there is the Azure free account. It usually follows the $200 once you've surrendered your credit card. You don't necessarily need to do that now. There are ways and means where you can try Azure without having a free account. So obviously, if you follow some of the Learn articles and follow some of the certification pathways, you'll actually get access to certainly like the Azure CLI to provision instances, learn a bit of Bash, for example, which you can use in the Cloud Shell. Learn a bit of PowerShell that controls resources. But also, you've got those applied credentials now that have recently come out where there's specific scenarios and it's lab driven. So securing blob and file access, provisioning Sentinel, those kind of lab environments where you are tested on not necessarily best practice, but on how to do certain things. That's kind of an entry path now, an additional entry path to other than having an Azure free account. Having a free account is brilliant because certainly for my kind of approach to certain things, I like to deploy it, and if I break it, I can, I can delete it and start again. Certainly, there's advantages with like certain licenses where you will receive Azure credits monthly, and certainly I have that functionality through work, which helps because obviously every month it's renewed, and I can deploy and delete and deal with services, and I think that's a big challenge. But if you're coming from a background, say from infrastructure or networking, or just want to try it out and see what it's all about, definitely the free account gives you enough for 12 months. Obviously, you get $200 credit. It's not enough to run something on. Like, you can build things, and obviously, if you go and provision like one of the largest VM SKUs, you burn through that $200 very, very quickly. Probably in minutes if you pick some of the slightly larger, like NVIDIA enabled GPU machines, they'll burn through credits like no tomorrow. So definitely, but there's always things that are free, and I think what people sometimes forget, even when you have a paid subscription, you will still have these. So, for example, like Azure automation accounts, they're always free, and what they kind of define by free is that every month you get 500 minutes of job runtime. So, using that as an example, you can have PowerShell scripts that run on premise. Say, the common example that I kind of always leveraged, like the free side of automation, was I'd have them integrate into Office 365 and do certain tasks for me. So whether that was enabling a mail transport rule or disabling a user account that met a certain condition, automation, you're only kind of bound by your own imagination. So if you can think of a scenario that you can automate, an automation account's brilliant. And if that script runs in 30 seconds, a minute, 10 minutes, you could have that running however many times you want within that month. And as long as it don't hit over them 500 minutes, you won't pay a single penny. Another example is obviously the static web app. So the blog that I've got at the moment runs on a static web app, and that is currently you get two slots, two static web apps for nothing. There's obviously some bandwidth, some restrictions, and some storage restrictions, but for hobbyists, if you just want to mess around with a static web app, whether that's developing your own or adopting a framework like Hugo, that option's there as well. So there's quite an extensive list of services that are free even after that initial trial period. So yeah, definitely leveraging a free account would be beneficial if you're exploring the cloud. Definitely, as much as we could start going into infrastructure as code, where the GUI becomes less important. But certainly, if you're in there doing, you just want to get a vibe for Azure and what it offers, definitely a free account just will give you that insight. And obviously, there's no commitment. The card, when you submit the card information, it's only for overages. So if you do provision that big box, make sure you turn it off, because otherwise you will get that bill. And like I say, depending on what you provision, that could be £10, $10, or it could be thousands of pounds and dollars that it goes over. Like I say, it depends on what you provision. So if you provision it, make sure you delete it if it's a VM, certainly, because obviously there's only so much credit you can burn through on that free account before they start charging you.
Yeah, you can put a spending limit on as well, can't you, I believe?
Yeah, so spending limits we see as a good way to, if we've got predictable workloads and we know that it's going to cost, $200 a month, £200 a month, whatever the currency is, we can put those spending limits in place. We can put budgets in place for alerting, and that comes round to, I want to say tail end of the calf into the WAFF. You're going into those operations where you extending the platform out more to just techies. Basically, you're looking at the business for buy-in from finance, buy-in from senior management to help manage that life cycle of services, and you can kind of get quite in depth into the framework, both frameworks of the CAF and the WAF, so the Cloud Adoption Framework. Bit Rontail, as it says, as it kind of describes and alludes to, is how you adopt the cloud, and then obviously the well-architected framework is how you then improve on those services. Both sections have, both frameworks have non-technical elements where people are required from the business to drive that adoption. So certainly from like a kind of an adoption and change management kind of perspective, there's it's more than just techies in those frameworks, which is good, because obviously, you've probably seen it yourself with M365. Oh, management want M365. They want Exchange Online. We want Teams. We want SharePoint. It gets thrown in, but then the adoption piece doesn't follow, and actually the utilization either decreases, or you have small pockets that do, small pockets that don't. So like I say, those frameworks really help and guide you to ensure that adoption is throughout the business, because otherwise sometimes people miss the value of the cloud. And I think, don't get me wrong, I'm sitting here talking about cloud services. I do see hybrid uses where you still have on premises. There's still valuable scenarios where it's not that I struggle to make a business case for the cloud. Sometimes it makes sense. So as long as, I think the classic kind of scenario that people have used is, I want to get out of my data center because the prices are going up. Well, if you don't own a data center and you've got it on-prem and you're happy with those prices, but you want to leverage some extension and almost treat the cloud as a data center extension to your on-prem kit, 100% can be the case. So we're not even touching the big playing services here like AVD or Azure SQL. We're just talking about extending out. So whether that's from extending your domain controllers. So you've got 2 on-prem domain controllers, all very good and healthy. You just want that extra site, because let's be honest, having an extra DC tucked away, just keeping the records, it's handy to have. And I've certainly been in scenarios where I've needed to recover a DC, and it's not fun. It's not pretty. Let's turn burr flags on. Let's get NTDS util out, and it's not. It's full of memories that I
No, I don't want to
don't really
revisit
want to
that.
remember. But you know, you don't you don't. I mean, I think you really need to understand what you want to achieve. When moving to the cloud, you can go all in, you can go half in, half out, you can use it for what you need. I mean, common scenarios for certainly for customers who have heavily virtualized on-prem infrastructures, there's certain backup products that actually leverage cloud storage as a cheap offsite repository, whether that's Blob or S3 bucket. We're going into like Amazon now, but we'll keep it Azure, but trying to be a bit vendor neutral at the same time. You know, just leverage it for offsite storage, just to protect your workloads. It can be used for anything, and like I say, you can go all in. It's down to skill set, what you want to use it for, and obviously budget ultimately does come into play at that point, because it is, like I say, it's a consumption service. You pay for what you use, and you know that one of the free services actually that's always free is Azure Advisor, which I think is a often overlooked feature as well, where that's sitting in the background looking at your workloads, looking what you're doing, and then it'll make suggestions around core pillars, one of them being cost. I'm coming back to cost, but that's the one that every time we talk about the cloud, it's the question, it's the theme, it's the messaging that comes up quite often, is that the cloud's expensive. No, the cloud is what you use. It can be expensive, don't get me wrong, and I think that's where, like I say, looping back to the free account, you can get a feel for what you need and then take it to the next step. You know, whether that's provisioning a VPN gateway and just extending them domain services out, just so you've got another copy of your AD sitting off elsewhere. I mean, like I say, I suppose it's a similar kind of approach to the automation account kind of analogy that I used, is that just take what you need. You can go all in, or you can go not. Like I say, it's up to you. There's so many options.
No, exactly.
Now with the it means that there's a million and one ways to approach something.
Totally. And there's it's much the same as you say in the M365 world, how far you go and whether you go fully cloud or hybrid, it depends on the organization. And I think most of the customers that you and I have worked with, or across the various organizations we've worked with, and certainly at Insight, are probably going to be long-standing customers who are relying on on-premises infrastructure and legacy apps, so they can't go into that fully cloud experience, because it's, I mean, they can, but it's going to take time and planning and get careful, diligent consideration. I think the very sort of few cloud-only customers that I've dealt with over the years usually tend to be these born-in-the-cloud startups. They're the ones who are in that privileged position that everyone else ultimately aims to get to in time.
Yeah, and I think, you know, you can go cloud only, but you still got to think and loop back to what the business requires. You 100% could go cloud only. You could rely on Azure AD solely for your identity purposes. Sorry, Entra.
New name.
You know, you could leverage Azure Active Directory domain services. It's not a service that I like using. I always try to avoid it, and that's just down to preference, but it's a service in itself that still has a valid place where you need, if you've got an application that needs slightly older protocols to interact, 100% has its use case. Like I say, it's just understanding the service and where you would apply it best. You like I say, you can throw anything at it, it'll cost you, and yeah, it might work, but is it the right service? I suppose you only know it's the right service if you play around and see what works best.
So with that in mind, do you think we could have a very brief look at what it looks like, the Azure Portal? Is that something you can share with us briefly and give us a little tour? Okay, we got it. Right, so what are we looking at here then, Ben?
So this is just the default landing page. Now, obviously, you won't have all these icons along the top when you first sign in. You actually have kind of a
Mm.
default set. It's just I've probably worked in these quite recently, and it is ultimately that it's recent services that you've used. I prefer this, and then obviously prefer searching for my desired Azure service. But you have got the hamburger menu at the side where it will list your favorites that you can ultimately change. A dashboard that I have never used, in all honesty. It would be nice to build something out that's a little more useful. But for sure, I always kind of land on the homepage, and typically I'm very transactional with it. Is that I'm coming in here for a reason, and then I go straight to that service. So I talked a bit about storage accounts. So I'm hitting basically straight away into the list of storage accounts. I want to do something with my AVD profiles, so for instance, and I want to come and look at the file shares basically, using FS logics and whatnot. And then here I can do what I need to do from a user profile perspective when it loads. But yeah, like I say, you can, if you want to provision a VM, you can hit the VM blade. I want to create Azure Virtual Machine. And with that, try it again. Oh, just waiting for it. And with that, obviously, it gives me the options where I can start building out my machine that I want to my specifications. So you can see here that I've got a couple of subscriptions and I've renamed them. So obviously I can see what they are. Core, landing zone, and management. These all will one way, shape, or form align back to the CAF. I kind of want to build a management machine feeling. I pick my resource group, which is a bit of a container, and that's all resource groups are: containers to collect, containers to contain like services and features in Azure. So you can logical grouping basically is a better way to explain it. I can create my own naming convention and store whatever I need to in it. Give virtual machine a name, so I could go like DC01. You can see that it filled in a resource group for me. You need a resource group. It won't just provision it in the middle of nowhere and leave it stranded. It'll put it in a resource if you don't specify one. For all the Azure regions available, so whilst we're based in the UK, if I wanted to go to, let's think, I think Qatar is one of the new ones. And yeah, there we go. So I could provision a VM in Qatar Central if I really wanted to. Now, I might not get the performance out of it that I desire, because I might be, being in the UK, the connectivity is going to be slightly different. But like I say, you provision your services as close as you could to yourself, or wherever your users are. You might be a UK-based business, but customer based in the US, well, provision everything in the US close to your customers. So yeah, that's just provisioning a VM. We've got a list of servers, different SKUs, so we can provision Ubuntu server, Windows Server 2022, and all. Obviously, depending on what you select, there's a cost element to it.
Yeah.
So Ubuntu server you'll just pay for the compute. It's a Linux open source distro, whereas Windows you will pay for Windows in that monthly fee that you get billed.
Right.
Discard those changes. We're not going to provision a VM, but like I say, from a subscription perspective, and just looping into that kind of cost management piece that you were saying before. Let's pick one with a bit of cost against it when it loads. So we'll look at the core subscription. So, whilst this is still a provided subscription for me, it will still tell you how much things cost. cost by resource, if I've got any Azure Defender coverage.
Yep.
And then what it'll also do is, obviously, if those services are running 24/7, it'll start forecasting for you. So we can see in this subscription, I'm forecast to spend £50 of my £125 credit I get every month. And then what that might consist of is, I've got some legacy stuff where I'll probably deprovision that. I've got a bit of Azure Arc in there, but you can see mainly this is leveraging some AVD infrastructure and some networking. And like I say, we're just picking this at random. And then if we drill into one, we just got a VNet. Now, you can have up to 50 VNets for free, so I'm not necessarily going to pay for that. But what I will pay for is obviously bandwidth in and out.
Yeah.
So these are all extra things that there is stuff that is free, but there are caveats. If you're going to use internet resource, internet egress, you will be billed for that. Anything coming inside is typically free. So they get you in on free, but when you're going out, you're going to get paid for it. You're going to have to pay for it. And I think the biggest thing as well, we've not mentioned it, but there is a pricing calculator, which is the top hit even just on pricing calculator. You can see how often I've Googled that rather than going direct, but it will allow you to, if you know roughly what you want to provision in Azure, you can use this tool to predict what that spend may be. So obviously you can tab these, you can sign in with an account and it will save them. So we've got a VPN gateway here, and I want to run it for 730 gateway hours. So that is what Microsoft is, how many months are in and out. Obviously, it will change depending on how many days there are in that said month. We can see that we've got VPN gateways, we've got express route gateways, which is just another form of connectivity. And then we've got another form of SKU where we can go basic VPN all the way up to gateway 5 with some advanced extra options on top. It tells me roughly how much a month that's going to cost me in dollars. It tells me I've got 10 tunnels included for site to site. I've got 120 connections for to site. And then obviously it's asking me about the inter-VNet data transfers, whether that's over inter-VNet or VPN. And then obviously there's a cost per gig for that. So like I said, you get quite granular. And just looping back to that bandwidth comment, if you search for bandwidth and I click in the right box, like I say, you can drill down to as much detail as possible. So if you are planning something out for a project, I want to know how much egress charge I'm going to get charged for. I'm going to route it via the Microsoft network, and I'm going to send 500 gig out onto that network. It's going to cost me $34.
Oh, brilliant.
Obviously,
there you go.
With Microsoft's recent effort, a lot of things are coming out. They align against dollars. So you may find that the currency market, that the prices will fluctuate a little bit. And that's just, like I say, it's just because Microsoft billing aligns against the US dollar now.
Oh, right, yeah. Of course.
So, like I say, you can come in here and predict it. But it just helps. It helps build. It loops back and helps in that business case. And also, as well, if you're on free credits, you can come in here and see how much something's going to cost to run as well. So if you've only got if you've got your $100, $150, $200 worth of credits, or what can I do with it? What can I provision before I get charged? Come to the calculator and find out. Obviously, this is a free service, so you don't necessarily pay for it. You can just pick what you want from a list of things, basically, and off you go.
Fantastic stuff. Well, that is fantastic, Ben. Thank you for giving us a little whistle-stop tour of Azure. That's been absolutely wonderful. So,
Sure.
What would you recommend for anyone who's wanting to start on this journey of becoming an Azure specialist or consultant or architect? Where would they start, and how would they study for this, would you say?
So I think definitely the way I'd start is if you've got an interest, 100% that's going to help. It's going to help for those times where you don't know what to do and you've hit that brick wall. If you've got a bit of a passion and a drive and an interest for it, it definitely helps on those days where you do sometimes question why. But then obviously the next thing for me would be looking at that, looking at those certified pathways and what kind of appeals to you most, and use the Microsoft Learn platform. It's free, there's no charge for it, and that'll really help. Reading that material kind of give you that insight to, that interests me, I want to go down that path, whether that's Power Platform developer or Azure administrator or Azure solutions expert, whichever way you want to go. Microsoft Learn will help you get there. And then ultimately the free account will just kind of tie that knowledge source from Learn into more of a practical experience and see, well, actually, is this the thing for me? And like I say, I alluded to like infrastructure as a code. Obviously, even on the free service, you can still use stuff like Bicep, Terraform. It's another angle and one we could go into, but I feel like there's going to be another guest coming up who could probably do it better justice than I.
Oh, don't sell yourself short, my friend. And there's way too much to cover. All of this in one video, let alone 2 or 3. We could, and we will certainly. I will certainly want to invite you back to talk some more about some more topics on within Azure. So. Brilliant stuff, my friend. I couldn't agree with you more as well. I think those learning pathways on learn.microsoft.com, I'm always talking about those myself. And those beginner certifications, those 900 ones. So in the Azure case, AZ900 is a great one to start with, and you can progress from there. And it's a great place to be right now in the Microsoft stack of products, and so much going on, and it'll just continue to run and run. Yeah. So I think that's all we have time for today. Ben, it's been wonderful of you to join me. I do thank you for being my very first guest.
Thank you.
I will finish off the video by, as always, asking you all to give this video a massive thumbs up. That will help me to reach a wider audience and make an impact on that all-important YouTube algorithm that we're all trying to understand. And do hit that subscribe button as well if you could. That also helps me massively. Thanks to my members. I've had some new members lately. I do appreciate you. Watch out for more members-only content coming soon. And Ben, thank you once again. We will definitely have you back, my friend. And I'll see you all on the next episode of Educating Peter. So thanks a lot. Yeah. Cheers, Ben. Thanks all. Bye-bye.
Cheers, Peter. Thanks.